Okay, hi, I'm Catherine Snedeker. Welcome to Casual Conversations with Brain Injury Professionals, the casual chat that's based off the issue Brain Injury Professional, Women versus Brain Injury. If you'd like a copy, let us know. And it is a full magazine with articles of interest on domestic violence, military service, exercise, and we are going through and I'm interviewing all the people that are in the magazine. So the other thing I'd like to tell you is that in July will be the virtual IBIA World Congress, and you should have gotten an email today about that. If you did not, let us know. You'll see all the logos of IBIA, NAVIS, and then Pink Concussions. We'll have a day there, more information to come. And then the last thing I wanted to just let you know is it's my birthday on Sunday and Valentine's Day in the US, maybe in Canada, I don't know. And every year I ask one day of the year if people want to make donations to Pink Concussions. And I make these pins. I don't know how to do that. I make these brain pins. So if people have a donation of $200 or more, I will send you a brain pin that I personally make myself. So thank you. Thank you. Happy early birthday. I appreciate that. So Valentine's Day is my birthday. It's the one day year I ask people to donate to Pink Concussions if there's value for what you have. So now starting our show, we have two people who I feel like I've known forever, Karen and Paul, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourselves? Let us know where you're from and just a little bit about how you got to brain injury.
Want me to go first?
I sure do.
Okay, I'm Paul Vandonkelaar. I'm a professor in the School of Health and Exercise Sciences at the University of British Columbia's Okanagan campus in Kelowna, BC. If you've ever been to Kelowna, you know that it's a beautiful place, even though it's kind of cold right now. I've been a brain injury researcher for, probably 20 years now, focusing for most of that time on sports-related concussion, but in the last 4 or 5 years or so on brain injury and intimate partner violence as well.
And where are you from originally?
Yeah, how did you get there?
Well, I grew up in the sprawling metropolis of Quesnel, British Columbia, which is a very small town, even further north than Kelowna, and spent most of my childhood there before going off to university in Vancouver and Calgary, and then did a postdoc in Marseille, France for 1 year, and then another 2 years of postdoc in Oxford, England, before getting my first faculty position in the Department of Human Physiology at the University of Oregon in Eugene, Oregon. So I'm a Ducks fan for sure. And
you've been into a lot of countries, though. That's very interesting. How many different places you've practiced medicine?
Yep. And then I've been at UBCO for the past 10 years.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you have any views of how socialized medicine compared to how care is like delivered in the United States?
Yeah, actually. So I lived in Oregon for 15 years and had a very good job in Oregon as a professor. And my ex-wife is an engineer and also had a very good job. So I think when you have a very good job that pays well in the US, healthcare is amazing. It's just for everyone else that can be a challenge. In Canada, with socialized medicine, everyone gets the support they need. And sometimes that can be a little bit more difficult relative to the top-end care that you can get in the US. So there's absolutely pros and cons in terms of the comparison between the two countries.
Interesting. And Karen, tell us about you.
So I did not grow up in Quesnel. From what I hear, it's way too cold there for me. Although I grew up in Ontario, which is in the eastern part of Canada, and it gets pretty darn cold there in the winter too. I was born and raised there, and I went to university at a university there called Carleton University in Ottawa, our nation's capital, where my career path has been pretty meandering and odd, perhaps. I have a journalism degree. So I did a 4-year journalism degree and worked as a professional broadcast journalist for about 10 years, mainly with our national broadcasters, CBC, television and radio. And then I moved into doing communications work, marketing, communications, public relations, mainly for organizations that I felt that I could make a difference with, sort of values-based stuff. And then I was always a volunteer and volunteered for Kelowna Women's Shelter, which is an organization here that provides emergency and transitional housing to women fleeing intimate partner violence and abuse. And from there, I became the executive director and did that work for just over half a dozen years before moving more of my focus into brain injury and intimate partner violence.
And what caused you to reach out to volunteer in the first place? And there's so many different places to volunteer.
Well, I have my own personal experiences with a relationship that was not healthy in a lot of ways and went on for too long. So it was personal motivation that led me to want to help out in that sector, and then really drove me to take on a leadership role and do what I could to help other women find healthy relationships.
As my background before social work was also journalism, and I'm always a great plug for journalism degrees because communications. I mean, at the time there was no, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but some of the things that we learned about outdoor advertising work very well when you're trying to look, on a section on Twitter, like what can be seen, what our marketing ideas are. So I think it's a great degree.
Yeah, the transferable skills are incredible. I mean, if you can be a solid communicator and put a good sentence together and know how to tell a story, you can go pretty far.
And now the dishy part of our talk today. How did you guys meet?
Well, it was almost 6 years ago.
Yeah.
6-ish years ago. We were slightly less middle-aged than we are now. And I was executive director at Kelowna Women's Shelter. Paul was, and still is, a professor at the university researching concussion, mainly at the time in athletes. And we met on Tinder. We both swiped right. Because
Tinder love.
I know. Because look at him. He's super cute and he's really smart. And
I warned him we were going to talk about this.
That was that. Our first date, we went for dinner and had this just wonderful dinner with lots of great conversation and decided we had more to talk about. So we went for this great walk along the waterfront, and we'd known each other all of whatever, few hours, although we'd had lots of online conversations before we met. And we walked by a gentleman who was, looked like he might be having a rough time in his life. And he sort of reeled by us and said, "You guys are a great looking couple." So we thought, well, we better start dating then, because, this guy knows what he's talking about. And a few months into our relationship, I read an article, an editorial that kind of connected intimate partner violence and brain injury. And I had my light bulb moment. And I immediately forwarded that article to Paul and said, "What are we doing? Well, why are you looking at football players? We need to get a grant and we need to study women." So
I, did the thing that every good researcher does. I went on PubMed and searched for intimate partner violence and brain injury. And I think something like 4 articles came up, 3 of which were by Eve Valera.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Eve.
And so, said, holy smokes, there's not really much research on this. And yet it's so obvious, like Karen said, the light bulb moment. So, actually, pretty early in, I arranged to have a phone call with Eve and pick her brain about what she's done on this and the approach, the best approaches to use from a scientific perspective in terms of addressing this issue. It's a complex issue, and so it's challenging from a scientific perspective, but it's totally worth it.
So Paul managed to get some funding from an anonymous donor quite quickly, and we launched the project that we now call SOAR, and you can see our banner behind us. SOAR stands for Supporting Survivors of Abuse and Brain Injury Through Research. It's a bit of a loose one, but we feel like it works, and we like the word SOAR because it suggests moving forward and improving and getting better.
I'm just looking at the letter. Okay, that's great. And Eve, do you remember that phone call from Paul? I know Eve's on with us.
I sure do.
Yeah. Hi, Eve.
Hi. Hi, Paul and Karen, 2 of my favorite peeps.
So do you remember getting that phone call from the Canadian man?
I sure do. I was so excited. I was like, yay. I was like, yep. This is something that more people need to be working in. And this is awesome. I'm so excited.
think it was,
And in the what was really nice too is that he already had a good scientific background. Obviously, he was doing brain injury work already, so he knew that part really well. And he just needed a little bit of direction with the other stuff. He was great. And then Karen here could address so many issues. So it was like the dynamic duo, and it was really, really awesome. And they've done great work. It was so exciting. And I continue to work with Paul and Karen to this day, and I love it.
And that segues us very nicely to an upcoming event that we all are taking part in. Karen and Paul, do you want to tell us how that research has led to the event we have coming up?
yeah, so we have an event, a virtual conference in just a couple weeks, actually, that is going to be looking at three main tracks. One is basically the evidence, or the data that allows us to clearly make this link between intimate partner violence and brain injury. One is around kind of awareness and advocacy. A lot of this, like you mentioned earlier, is about communication and making sure that the right people hear the messages around this and potentially are in a position to be able to do something about it. And then a third track is on kind of rehabilitation and interventions and how supports can be provided, whether it's through healthcare or through community-based supports. At the end of the day, ultimately what we want to achieve is better outcomes, better quality of life in survivors. And so all of these things, I think, work together towards that.
We were fortunate enough a couple of years ago to receive a really substantial donation from our federal government Department of Women and Gender Equality. Part of that in the budget allowed us to travel to conferences and share information and research findings. But when COVID hit and it became clear we weren't going to be traveling much anytime soon, we thought, well, let's use that budget and put it towards doing this virtual event and bring all the amazing people we've had the chance to meet and work with over these half dozen years to share their knowledge. But I think we didn't want it to just be a bunch of experts presenting research findings or information. We wanted to take it to that next place of how are we using this information in the real world to help people. So the notion of kind of promising practices in the three areas that Paul talked about. And we're so excited because we've got Catherine, who's going to present and tell the story of her story and how Pink Concussions came to be and all the incredible advocacy work she's been able to do. And Eve's going to be our main opening keynote speaker, kind of setting the stage on the topic and all the work she's done as the pioneer. I say the word pioneer, but every time I see Eve, who looks like a gorgeous 16-year-old, I'm like, the word pioneer doesn't feel quite right because you're not some old lady in your, hat and on a wagon train somewhere. Anyway, but we've got some amazing speakers. I'm sure a number of the folks on the call will be speaking a lot of great topics. And we have Rachel Louise Snyder, the author of No Visible Bruises, What We Don't Know About Domestic Violence is Killing Us, which is one of my top reads that we recommend to everyone on intimate partner violence. And she does address the topic of brain injury through concussive blows and through strangulation in the book. So we're really excited to have her as our second day keynote speaker. And I'm mostly excited because I fangirl all over the place with her and I get to interview her as part of this. So it's really about me.
And what are the days and times of that conference again?
February 24th and 25th. And I believe we've got the sessions are from 10 a.m. to sort of mid-afternoon, and then a networking session after each day that people can choose to go to a networking session specifically on kind of the education, awareness, advocacy side, or they can go to one about promising practices in rehabilitation or research. So we're hoping that the various expert speakers will be at these different networking sessions so people can just connect as if, not quite as if you were at a conference, but sort of a little bit.
And I noticed people in the chat are asking for the link. Eve, do you mind putting the link up for that?
Right.
Will the conference be recorded? If your people aren't able to attend, will you have content on that goes online afterwards?
So what we're doing, we're offering the conference free because we've received this funding, except for a $10 administrative fee. So basically, people can register to attend, and then you'll have access to the recordings for 30 days afterwards.
Okay,
So
that's great.
we do have folks, in places like Australia and the UK who have registered, and they'll just do it online in the 30 days afterwards.
Okay. So a little bit of confusion how SOAR, an acronym for SOAR. So other people are explaining. Thank you for chat room people explaining.
Yes. See, when it was important to us, and I have sort of this, communications and marketing background. So of course I wanted us to have a name for our project that would be recognizable and we could build a brand around it. You get this part, Catherine.
Yeah. Concussions, right?
Right.
You can hate it or love it, but no one ever forgets it.
Exactly. And so Paul and everyone else was like, the UBC Kelowna Women's Shelter Brain Injury and Intimate Partner Violence Research Project. And I was like, okay, that won't do. We have to think of an actual name. So I basically wrote out a whole bunch of names I thought kind of connected and would work, and then figured out stuff to go under them. So SOAR was our best bet. It is a bit of a loose one, but I still like it.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
dyslexic, so I skip words anyway, so it worked for me.
Okay.
So my only input was that it needed a brain.
Okay, you got your brain.
Yeah. So when we were looking at the potential logos, and it was like I had 3 different versions of the image that might be the brain, I knew Paul would pick this one because it really looks like a brain. There were some that were a little more, just called to mind the shape of a brain or the idea of a brain, but Paul had to say, no, it has to look like a brain.
Yeah,
so we
see,
have that one.
We're more on the bejeweled, bedazzled brain in concussions. We like our bling here, so. We're going to have the link up for the conference. Very excited, very honored to speak at that. And then that segues to the other topic we wanted to discuss, which is the online training. And I am excited to show you all that I did the online training. It's dark on that side. I did the online training and could print out my certificate this morning. So I'd love for you to tell people how the online training came about and what the certificate is for.
Sure. So I can give a bit of an introduction to it. So this was another conversation at a meeting with a colleague, Shalina Babul, who is at the BC Children's Hospital associated with the UBC's Vancouver campus down in Vancouver. And so she, over the past, I think 10 years or so, has created what's called the Concussion Awareness Training Tool. It's an online training set of modules for, originally it was for people either who had suffered a sports concussion or people who supported people who had suffered a sports concussion. So there was a module for the athletes and the parents themselves. There's a module for sports administrators and medical professionals, and also a module for those who work in the education system. So, raising awareness and knowledge about brain injury in their student athletes who, might need accommodations, for example, as part of their return to normal activities. And so I approached Shalina at a meeting and said, hey, we're starting this work on IPV related brain injury, and would she be interested in contributing to and helping develop a module that's specific for frontline staff at women's shelters? Again, the idea being to raise knowledge and awareness of brain injury in those who are providing support on the front lines. And so, again, we were fortunate enough to be able to get some funding through a variety of sources and put this together. A lot of, in this case, my contribution was the original kind of, hey, we should do this. and then it was like, okay, now I've reached the limit of what I know about how to do this. And so I kind of passed it on to Shalina, and she worked a lot with Karen and some of the staff, both at the BC Children's Hospital and some of the people that work on the SOAR project, to really pull it together and make it what it is, which I think has been a huge success.
We launched it to the public in the fall, but before that we had put it out to women's shelter workers across Canada to help us try it out and to do some pre and post measurement on what they knew before they took the course versus what they knew afterwards. And we'll be following up with some research with those same folks about what has changed in terms of their daily practice with clients since they took the course. We're really excited to find that out, and then we'll be able to publish some of the results of that. One thing that was unique about this module of the concussion awareness training tool is that because of what we're dealing with here with women in intimate partner violence, we included a section on strangulation, which we know that is not a concussive brain injury. It's very different. But because strangulation is so prevalent in intimate partner violence, and we know it's such a key mechanism for brain injury and death, we really wanted to ensure we included it in the concussion awareness training tool. I wish we could have done more, but at least it's in there, and we do have some other resources. I think we've had some really good response. There's probably been maybe 450 people have taken it by now. And we've also created some workshops based on the course that we can deliver online. And we'll be doing that as part of the Moving Ahead conference. We'll be doing sort of a half-day workshop based on the concussion awareness training tool, so people can get that certification that you got online, Catherine, which is super quick and easy. But then we'll also dive deeper into some of the topics and do some workshopping for frontline workers on how they would deal with certain scenarios and certain client situations in the workplace.
There's a and it was enjoyable to take, and even the the tests that you went through, one of them you were dragging the answers into one pile or the other. It was I thought the amount of time and the level and the interest, I kept my interest. So very nicely done on that.
And did you like that it was did you recognize it was my voice?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's, we're on a budget, so I did the voiceover track.
Yeah, no, that's great. With the conference, there's some questions that I saw go by on the audience. Who is the conference for?
Anybody. That's why we have sort of the 3 different tracks. Anyone who wants to or is interested can attend. But so far, we've got a really wide range of professionals and people's backgrounds. We have a lot of police officers who've signed up. We have brain injury clinicians. We have community-based brain injury support workers and agencies, women's shelter workers, nurses and healthcare professionals, some from the areas of justice and probation. So it's really wide, and we're trying to ensure that the content is varied enough that there will be something for everyone, whether you just want to learn some of the basics or you really want to, check out a promising practice of something they're doing somewhere else and see if you could adapt it to your own context.
What about a survivor? What about somebody who has just thought of this as a connection in their own story? Would this be a beginner's topic kind of thing? Do you have trigger warnings, or how should somebody that has lived this experience and exploring it, how should they approach the conference?
That's a really good question. That's something we did think about, because we know that a lot of folks who work in the sector do so because of personal motivation and personal lived experience. So we will have a trauma counselor who will be participating in the conference both days and accessible to anyone who needs to talk to someone in case they get triggered or upset. And we will be doing warnings at the beginning of the sessions just so that people are aware. Some of the content will be pretty hard hitting. And we have, a couple sessions on strangulation, which can be a traumatizing topic to hear about and talk about, but we know it's important, so we have to address it.
And that's great. And I do find all the events we do have allow people with lived experience to be a part of it, but try to include trigger warnings when a particular topic might be upsetting. And then within Pink Concussions, our support group, that's available 27 hours, 27 hours, 24/7. And I know that, we have people in that group that can also provide support too. Just look at the questions. Any other aspects about, of course, sort of at the end of our chat and go to Q&A, is there anything else that that I didn't ask you about that you want to share with the audience?
Well, the one piece that we're excited about with the work we've been doing that we're just heading into is more on the rehabilitation side. we're going to be pilot testing a program to try and bring together a variety of services in our community that do brain injury rehabilitation and brain injury support, but they do them in a more siloed type way. And so we're doing some training with them on intimate partner violence, and we'll have some participants going through this rehabilitation program that includes, cognitive functional exercises and aerobic exercise and mindfulness meditation, occupational therapy. And it's a 6-month program. We're really excited to start doing that and measure before and after changes in function and resilience and quality of life. So we're just about to start that. So that's kind of exciting.
Now, would that be a virtual rehab, or is that something that's in your area?
It is local, but we're doing it all virtually because of the wonderful COVID.
Okay. How has COVID changed the practice in your particular shelter?
Well, I know at the Kelowna Women's Shelter, I'm not there any longer, but I know they had all the protocols in place, and they actually got funding to open up a motel as well, so that if they had to have people isolating, they could still provide them safe refuge, but in a different setting. And I've also been doing work at a homeless shelter, and there have been similar things happening at the homeless shelter. We've been quite lucky in our community that we haven't had any big outbreaks in any of our communal shelter type settings, which is fantastic. But it's certainly changed, and I'm sure everyone doing research has seen this, it's certainly changed how we've been able to do research.
Yeah, so we haven't collected any data in the lab since March of last year, almost a year now, but we are gearing up to start doing some data collection, including around this intervention using virtual tools, including Zoom to do some of the interviews. And so there are absolutely limitations to that, and also advantages, right? Like we could, in theory, test and have people from anywhere that might be going through this experience as part of the research. With respect to COVID and the support, in communities, I think the federal government has been really responsive to providing support for women's shelters specifically, given the fact that it's pretty clear that IPV is kind of been on the rise as part of the pandemic, and so the federal government has been quite responsive in allowing places like the Kelowna Women's Shelter to get some additional funding so that they can open up these additional facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Another stress and strain from COVID in our world. I was talking to a shelter that was saying that they still are providing services for the families, but the families have to be isolated in their own rooms, and the common areas can't be used, and the enrichment programs that they would bring in, and it was just tough because to keep everybody in their safe spaces really changed. So we're going to open up for Q&A now. Cara is going to look through the questions and jump in with reading some of the questions online. So if you've posted a question online, Cara is going to look through those. And then if you want to, I'm going to switch to a view where I can see does somebody want to undo their mic? Introduce yourself and one sentence about you and or your organization, and then start out with my question is, so that we can offer a time to the many people on this call.
I see the first question I see posted by Joanne Andrews is if the audience for the conference will include those who work in the IPV sector and those who work in the brain injury sector as well.
Yep, both. We're promoting it to both, and we've definitely got registrations from both.
Does anybody in the audience have a question while Cara is reading through?
I'm in New Mexico in Santa Fe, and I'm a domestic violence survivor from 40 years ago, and again from 2 years ago. So it's hard to come back to it unexpectedly. One of the concerns that I bring forward is access for people to the judicial system who are dealing with brain injury, and the lack of accommodations because of the lack of understanding that you may be able to articulate yourself well, but you may not be able to follow information that's verbal, visual, and written at the same time, and how those accommodations can be accomplished. And I was wondering if you had an interface with some of the Kessler Foundation efforts to create access for women who are victims of brain injury in DV or intimate partner violence. I like the new acronym I've learned today. And how, what kind of interface is available internationally and domestically around access to the judicial system and that comprehension factor. Thank you.
That is an amazing question, and that is a huge challenge. We're certainly, you know, that's why when we've talked about this work, we first started thinking we needed to teach, you know, get it to women's shelter workers first. And then the more work you do, the more you realize every single system needs to be educated on this topic, because that awareness just isn't there. And then the service provision is not done through that lens of thinking a brain injury may have occurred. So the first phase for us was working with women's shelter workers to help them understand that this was often part of the woman's experience. But certainly working with the justice system and policing, all of that is huge. We have not done a lot of that yet, but it's on the radar, and we have been working to do presentations and speak to folks in our justice system here in Canada. But it's a huge challenge. And Paul actually has a master's student right now who's doing some work on investigating how the justice system deals with women in intimate partner violence generally, and the implications with the brain injury piece, and if we're screening women for brain injury.
Yes, he's undertaking a project. He's just about to start to collect data. It's mainly through the lens of, I guess, what you might call service providers, so lawyers themselves who work in family law, primarily in family law, giving them basically qualitative interviews around scenarios where a potential client either would or would not have a brain injury, and how they might approach, for example, a child custody case based on the using with that evidence in place or not. And so, you know, it gets at kind of the kind of legal, ethical aspects of awareness of a brain injury in women who survive intimate partner violence, and how that might be used both in a positive way and potentially a negative way in that particular context. I think, I mean, one of the things you mentioned was kind of how to navigate the system, and certainly one of the things that we've, I think, been pushing in terms of our own, you know, investigating this intervention, but also, I think it also applies to the judicial system, is the idea of someone that can provide supports and help them navigate the system, which is, you know, sad that we need that, but at the same time, I think with the way the systems are currently set up, that's the sort of thing where I think there's a big return on investment in terms of helping people get the supports they need.
And that segues, Kathy put up a link to the ABI Justice website, and that's a partnership of the Law Foundation of Ontario in Canada and the Brain Injury Society of Toronto. And the Brain Injury Society of Toronto was able to get some funding, and you guys jump in if I'm not getting it right. They were able to get some funding a few years back to basically fund someone who would act as that navigator with clients. So helping them navigate the justice system and child protection issues and the things they had to deal with that with a brain injury, they might not normally be able to do as effectively, despite their best intentions. And I think they had some great results with that program, but I'm not sure if the funding is still there or if they lost it. But the notion of having a navigator type person to basically hold your hand through these different processes, including some of the medical and rehabilitative stuff, I think is a really critical piece.
Eve, you
If I
have your
could,
hand up?
if I can mention, if you include the qualitative and the quantitative, because the qualitative piece, I think, can help remove some of the judgmental well, that's a bad pun, judgmental processes that legal representation or court representation doesn't quite understand. You know, you may be missing the beat, but that doesn't mean you don't understand what's going on around you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. So what I wanted to say was really just that yeah, a huge part of this is educating the relevant parties. and some places, at least from my experience, are better at this and recognizing this than others. And so I think it has to be a combination of seeing what's going on and then putting yourself out there. So for example, I had given lectures for the Judicial Council of California for years, and I was so impressed that they're sort of ahead of the game in recognizing this as a potential issue and inviting me like repeatedly to come out and basically train their judges, probation officers, and people within the justice system. And so I think that it's very, very true that the judges don't understand necessarily what a woman with a TBI may look like, or that it's a big deal, or that if she gets up there and she's like, I can't read this, or seeming confused, that it may be a brain injury and not just either she's not trying or she's intoxicated or whatever. And so education is huge. And one of the things that I've also done, it depends on which level you're talking about. I've gone into police stations and basically trained all the police officers there to say, if you go knocking on someone's door, just because you smell alcohol, don't assume that a woman who's looking dizzy or giving an inconsistent story is intoxicated, because that's exactly what a brain injury may look like. So I think education is a huge piece. I think it's largely missing. But I think one thing that maybe, anyone who can reach out to their legislators, whoever, basically demand that this be some type of training that that needs to be, I don't know, sort of a part of mandated training for certain sectors, because you just don't know what you're dealing with if you don't know, if you're not asking the right questions, you basically get the story completely wrong. And the woman is left totally misunderstood, misrepresented. And then, here she is, struggling even more than you would if you didn't have a TBI, and already a very complex legal system that's not easy to navigate. So I think we're really, really behind the ball on that and getting things forward, but it's super important. And we need more initiatives to bring awareness there.
And
I think also within hospital systems, I know with Health and Hospitals and with NYU and Bellevue Hospital, that they have a big like crime victims unit, that I did some work with them at a conference there, and just the screening and the awareness of that. And that was everything from 9/11 to victims of rape and assault, where this wasn't even considered in the screening protocol for when people were coming in. And so that's awareness and education of these hospital centers and emergency workers, and also for social workers as well, that the education is just is not there. And whether it's through Brain Injury Alliance or Brain Injury Association, or just where the education should be, something that needs to be discussed with these crisis centers and emergency workers, and especially in these rape victims or domestic violence centers as well.
On February 25th, Hugh Williams is going to join me, Dr. Hugh Williams from Scotland, and we're going to discuss women in prison, the percentage of women in prison with brain injury, and the percentage of women who have experienced domestic violence, IPV. And I think the numbers will be not surprising to this group, but and then we are planning, we will have a full pink day at the International Virtual Brain Injury Congress, where we will discuss women in the prison system and brain injury, which will tie in IPV. So stay tuned for that. And I think we have time for a few more questions. Angela, did you have a question?
Yeah, I actually did. So for those that are on the call, I'm Angela Davis-Whitty. I'm a detective sergeant with the Ontario Provincial Police. So a couple of years ago, I started to have some education on with concussions, as well as Eve. She came to North Bay, Ontario. So like myself, I understand that our system doesn't screen for victims with brain injuries. And like you mentioned, they may appear to be drunk or intoxicated, but it might be a brain injury. So I'm looking to see if there is any specific resources, like questionnaires that we can utilize in our interviews, or as part of a screening process to help officers understand that these questions may be perfect for an interview, so we can actually have that documented. We know that I know frequently we may lay just an assault charge, but sometimes these charges may be actually aggravated assault or assault causing bodily harm. And I'll give you an example. I was reviewing a case where an individual had been sustained had an assault approximately a year prior to her death. And after that assault, she had repeated concussion symptoms, and she was having seizures regularly. And then ultimately she had passed away. So I'm trying to determine on, educating our officers that, a brain injury is life altering. And, a year down the road, somebody's death could have been as a result of that assault. And I'd like to see what's out there for information so that I can actually do that education with our officers. And I have been going online periodically to get little bits of information. Of course, when you're, there's so much information out there. So I'd like to see what's out there.
Before you answer, Paul and Karen, I have the helps tool up from if you want me to put that on the screen. Do you want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Sure.
Margaret or Megan, could you give me screen sharing? Why don't you just, if you want to talk, or whoever wants to just talk about the helps. Oh, hold on. Got it.
Got it. Yeah.
Got it. Here we go. Look how fast that transition was. There we go.
Perfect. Okay.
The helps tool is it's an old brain injury screening tool. It was developed in like the early 90s. And there's all kinds of different assessment and screening tools out there. What we did is we went to shelter workers with some of the top 5 screening tools for brain injury and had them give us their feedback on which ones they thought they might actually use in their practice. You have to keep in mind when you're working at a women's shelter, it's incredibly busy. You do a bunch of different assessments already, and they don't have a lot of time to deal with things. So the helps tool is really simple. It's 5 basic areas that you talk about. It didn't include strangulation, so we've added a question to the first one about, did your partner strangle you? Because we know that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a tool that we've been putting out there as an option for people to use if they want to screen. But we've also found that it seems to be more effective if it's just a guide for a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So it just gives the worker a framework of what to talk about with a woman that might raise the red flag for brain injury and then trigger them getting, further supports. But there's another one that the team in Ohio has developed that they call the CHATS tool, which also speaks to mental health and related issues that they're working to get validated. So that's another good one.
And that's Rachel, right?
Yeah.
Rachel spoke about that on one of our other talks with Rachel in the fall. I'm trying to put that link up for everybody.
Great. Yeah, so there's a number of different assessments. In that case you're talking about, was strangulation a part of that woman's experience in her prior assaults?
She had extensive minor assaults, and I don't recall having strangulation in that case. Now, when I actually examined, it was a result of an audit that I had done. And so I went back to look at occurrences with domestic violence cases in my region. And I happened to see the incident, and then I happened to see the death. And then I started to read some of the behavioral things. And it wasn't till I had this extra training sessions in North Bay that I started to wrap my brain around the fact that maybe this was a direct result of the injury she sustained, a year prior to that. I actually just recently had a concussion myself at the end of November, and I totally understand the comprehension or even the focus, even ability to articulate myself. When my brain is stressed, I actually stutter. So I do understand it now. It's different when you experience it. And now from a victim's perspective in the court system, it's not user friendly.
Yeah, no.
I don't envy any of my victims that have to testify on serious cases.
The concussion awareness training tool, even though we originally developed it for women's support workers, it only takes 30 or 40 minutes to do the course. And we've actually been pushing it out to police agencies as well to take it, because it really does have that quick and easy basic, here's what it looks like, here's how it might display, here are some ways you can help. So I think it's useful. I recently took the advanced strangulation prevention course that the Strangulation Prevention Institute puts on. And there were a number of police officers on that, and they really went away from that ready to push their organizations and their home communities to do more too. Have you taken that course?
I've taken something from there, and I can't remember. I've taken so many, I just don't know if it's the most recent one, but yeah, for sure. And I'm always in the point of educating officers in this area. The conference that you have coming up, I actually have a promotional interview coming up. So I'm not able to attend, but I like the $10 fee for the 30-day access anyways. But I think I'm familiar with, is it coatonline.com for the training that you were speaking of?
It's catonline.com.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should be in the chat. I think it got put up in the chat, and we can also, when I put the videos up, we can, when I send you the link to the video, I can also send you the specific link to the conference and to the training. And again, the training is free. I went on and did it today. That is a free training, and the conference is a $10 donation. Is that what you said, Kim?
Yeah, it's a $10 registration fee, but we're actually going to be donating whatever gets gathered in those registration fees to our partner Kelowna Women's Shelter. So by paying your $10 registration fee, you're also helping an intimate partner violence support agency.
And the other thing I wanted to say about the screening is exactly as Karen spoke, all of these screenings, all of these tools are tools to start a conversation, to maybe use some terms that wouldn't come to you that they have found through research. I know Eve's research about certain words. If you ask someone if you have a brain injury, you know, they may say no, but have you ever been hit so that you saw stars or were unconscious? And they'll say yes. So some of it's the terminology, but in no case are we asking people to diagnose concussions or stand in for medical care. It literally is starting a conversation and raising a flag that more help is needed. In the same way that for about a decade now, we've been training coaches in youth sports to go through a screening with the kids. So it's important to realize that these are conversational pieces.
And I don't know if there's anyone on this call who is not, who doesn't have English as their first language, but the concussion awareness training tool is also fully available in French as well.
That's awesome. Any other questions out there? And Cara, are there any questions from the chat?
I'm not.
I actually did have a question.
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, Paul, and also nice to virtually meet you, Karen.
Hi, Tori.
Hi, Tori.
Hi. Hi. Have you guys considered, or could you speak to the follow-up provided to the survivors following the 6 months of rehab and data collection, or like what that transition would look like following the 6 months?
Yeah, it's a great question. The intervention itself is run by or implemented by our community partner Brain Trust Canada, and it is actually making use of a program that was developed by a company called ABI Wellness, which is from the Vancouver area and has shown some really good preliminary results with people with more moderate to severe brain injury from other injury mechanisms like car accidents and falls, for example. And you know, one of the kind of main outcomes, certainly their clients, one of the things that they want to be able to do is to be able to return to work in some form and be able to, you know, have a higher quality of life as a result of that. And so I think they've in their studies so far, they've been able to show that, you know, with that support and by going through the program, that ability to return to work and have a higher quality of life is a positive outcome that many of them attain and are able to maintain for a period of time after, or, you know, basically as long as they've been looking at them. We don't have a lot of information right now about any ongoing support that would happen after the 6 months, but I think it's a really valid question and something that makes a lot of sense in terms of, a lot of intuitive sense in terms of, yes, this is probably something that would need to be ongoing rather than just 6 months and then, you know, good luck.
We have applied, well, we're in the early letter of intent stage, applied for some funding that would allow us to expand what we've already got planned for this support program, to add a peer-to-peer support and mentorship aspect. So in addition to the mechanisms that are already part of the rehabilitation program, we would add sort of a group sponsor support counseling type idea and create kind of a peer-to-peer support network. The hope being that that could be something that could continue and live on. But I really hope we get some funding, because that would be amazing. And then we could also, again, measure the efficacy of including that versus say not including it and see what the impacts are.
That's great, thank you.
Is there a tool to differentiate trauma from specific to TBI or any like predisposed symptoms? Like how will that be, you know, differentiated?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it gets to the complexity of this experience, right? And kind of by extension, the complexity and the multifaceted nature of any supports that need to be provided. And I think, you know, what you see in women's shelters is a reflection of that complexity in terms of the things that they do and the supports and referrals they make to you know, organizations that can provide those sort of supports. And so, yes, it's absolutely true that there's obviously more going on here than just a brain injury. There's PTSD almost in every case. There's depression and anxiety. There's a history of abuse. There's potential, you know, difficulty with housing. So all of these factors that can contribute to challenges in day-to-day life, and brain injury is in that mix. And so, you know, I think the challenge is finding the right set of tools that would allow, whether it's a healthcare provider or someone working in a women's shelter or other forms of support, being able to tease apart how much of each of those factors is contributing, and then providing appropriate multifaceted support so that the person can, you know, negotiate their way through what they're experiencing and come out the other end with a higher quality of life. So it's by no means easy, and kind of one of the things that I've come to appreciate is that in doing this research and working on this programming, it's really important to embrace that complexity and try as best as you can in all the different things that we're doing to incorporate it into the questions we're asking and the things that we're trying to do.
And there are those who would say, if you've got great tools that you know will support someone who's had a brain injury, they're probably not going to hurt somebody who maybe is not experiencing as much from the brain injury and is experiencing more from PTSD or depression. Throw the tools at them and it's going to help somehow. That's not scientific though.
I mean, I know in with traumatic brain injury, you know, in the United States, in certain cases, it's whether you go through disability or you contact or through the hospital, you know, you're given like a case manager, you know, specifically for people, whether they get the traumatic brain injury waiver, you know, or enrolled in certain programs. And necessarily, you know, that's hard to do, but like a case manager is necessary. I mean, especially in this, you know, to just help the people be able to access the services, because it's just not common knowledge that these programs, you know, are available for this specific population. And so do need, I guess, a care manager, a navigator, you know, to be able to help manage their case and make sure they get access to the services that are available specifically for this population.
Another source is looking at the military work with PTSD and trauma. In addition to this weekly call, Concussions also has a domestic violence brain injury task force, and we've been meeting. I think we've had 22 calls over the last 2 years, and it's the last Tuesday at 2 o'clock at the end of the month, and you're welcome to join that task force. The calls are also online on the Pink Concussions website. These calls are being put on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, but those calls are actually on the Pink Concussions website. And there's a number, I think almost every third or fourth call is somebody in the military talking about PTSD and brain injury. And our last call, they were specifically talking about a program that they're doing with soldiers that they think would transition well for women with PTSD and trauma from domestic violence. So I think there's a lot to be learned with the military community. I've never had great luck with connecting to the military in Canada. Have you guys ever worked with them on any parts of your research?
We did a presentation to an organization that provides support to military families in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan last year. Virtually, but that's it so far.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to reach out to them. Well, we're at the end of our time now. I really want to thank you, Karen and Paul, for everything. Do you have a 1 minute each wrap up you'd like to, final moments?
I think I've said enough. Paul I'm known for talking too much. Paul can wrap it up.
Karen is the communicator, and I just feed science to her. But no, I mean, I guess that the thing that this is a really important issue, and I guess one of the things that has become clear in doing this work is that it takes a team of people who with different expertise and experiences, and that's certainly something that I've come to appreciate over the last few years. And I think that the partnership that we have personally, but also professionally around this, in terms of, I'm the science, I'm in the lab, and I'm trying to create evidence that allows us to say that there's this link. And then Karen's the communicator and finds great ways to translate some of the things that we're generating into messages and programming. And so I think that's a really important component of work in this area in particular because of the lack of knowledge and awareness. So getting that evidence in whatever form, whether it's super deep and geeky and here's some cool graphs, or just the basic, there's a link between brain injury and intimate partner violence. It's something you need to take into account and to find a better way to provide support. I think that's the key in all of this is making sure that link is there in whatever form it might take.
Well, thank you both for your time. And then I see Nick. Nick is up in Australia. Hey, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Nick did a great talk on all the work they've done with family violence in Australia and a report they put out. So again, Pink Concussions website, that's the task force. Check out Nick's talk, and I'm going to grab Nick. Nick has to wake up very early for my adventures since they're always at 2 o'clock. So we should get up before Nick's kids. I wish everybody a safe and healthy week. I love talking to you guys every week. Remember, if you want a Pink Concussions bling ping, what I will personally make with my little fingers, it's a $200 donation to Pink Concussions for my birthday, which is on Sunday. Have a lovely Valentine's Day if you celebrate. And next week we'll have Willie Stewart from Glasgow. I've twice been to Willie's brain lab, and he's a fascinating guy. And the week after that, we'll have Hugh Williams. So I think we've got 5 or 6 more weeks planned for you guys. So thank you for continuing to come back, for waking up early, for staying up late, for being a part of this. Thank you guys. Take care. Thank you, Colin and Karen.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.